Welcome back after a long hiatus to this series where I'm programming an NES game from scratch and sometimes live on Twitch, but not for a while. So, in the past 3 weeks, I apologize for the lack of episodes, but I have been extremely busy with work and travel for work, and so have not been able to get back into it. So, I figured I'd record a quick episode tonight, probably about an hour, and then resume our normal schedule next week with an episode dropping on Monday night, and then a stream on Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Some quick things. So the first is that last time we talked to Wiggy from Old School Gamers channel on YouTube, and we talked about NES Dev and his questions and how he got into developing for the NES. And one of the things that he and I talked about on that discussion was that we were going to do a debugging session, and I believe that we had agreed that it was going to be next week. So stay tuned for details on that. We'll be doing a live stream session on Thursday of next week, if he's able to, where we will go through how to use the debugger in Messen so that he can debug problems like we've been doing here on this channel. So that's the first thing. I'll keep you posted on Twitter on details related to that at Clairvis on Twitter. So the next thing is, I know I haven't really talked about it that much, but I did want to mention that I've started a Patreon. So if you like what I'm doing here and you want to help by just kind of giving a little bit of support on this, I'd appreciate it. It's patreon.com/Clairvis. Even if it's $1 a month, that would be great. Or if you want to pre-order the game and get access to the source code, you can do that on itch.io, and I'll paste the links to all of those things in the description below the video on YouTube. The last thing I wanted to talk about was where we're going with the game. So basically, where we are right now is trying to get actual gameplay going. So I've spent a lot of time working on tools and kind of getting things functionally working with the technology side, but as you know, there's not a whole lot of gameplay here. We need to get moving on that if we ever want to finish this game. And part of the challenge there is that I'm most comfortable building these tools, and have always been good at building these kinds of tools for both work and my own projects. And so it's the game development aspect of this is the more challenging thing. And I've said that a few times, but making a game is much harder than making the tools to support making the game, because it's really clear when you say I need a tool to do X, Y, and Z, how to do that most of the time. Even if it's challenging, it's still pretty straightforward. But creating a new game from scratch requires a lot of understanding about how you want to make the game, and the concepts around the game, and what the mechanics are, and what's fun and what isn't fun. And so that's what we're going to start exploring here now that we have most of the technical stuff set up, because we need to do that in order for this to be more than just a tech demo. Again, I've said that probably a few times, but we're going to start really pushing in that direction. I have tested the Flickr functionality that we implemented a couple episodes ago, and it is working. Even on a CRT, it's not great though. So we're going to have to look into how we want to implement that in probably the next episode on Monday of next week. The doc from Nintendo Age contacted me. He had watched the episode on Flickr and had suggested an algorithm that might work better than what we implemented on Monday. So I'm going to take a look at what we would need to do to implement that here in the game. It sounded reasonable, but I haven't really messed with it too much other than just reading through it and understanding what his suggestion was. And then, what's the last thing? There was one last thing. There was one last thing, but I don't remember. If I remember, I'll bring it up again. So anyway, oh, that's what it was. 0 Pages, episode 5 on backgrounds and attributes. I will start recording that, I think, this weekend, and actually finally drop that. I apologize for the long delay there. I know people have been waiting for it and are really liking that series, but those episodes are the hardest for me to make because of the amount of time and editing that they require. One of the things that I'm going to start doing with the episodes, all the episodes, whether they're 0 Page episodes or these episodes, is on the Patreon, writing up little blog posts about what was done and what sort of the conclusion was in a short summary. So again, if you're interested in that, check that out. But let's get started. We've been away from this for far too long, and I want to make some progress here. So one of the things that we did was we were testing out the flicker here with all these enemies. I wanted to implement some functionality to allow us to do something similar to what most shoot 'em up games do, which is having groupings for the enemies. So frequently what you'll see in a shoot 'em up is you'll be flying along, and you'll get a group of enemies that fly out in a pattern together, and if you destroy all of them, then you get a little bonus item that floats on down, and you can pick that up. I wanted to do something like that because even if we don't use it in exactly that form, that concept will be something that we're going to want. So what we need to do, first of all, is get rid of all of those enemies. We don't need all of them. Okay, so we're there. And so what I'm thinking we would want to do is something along the lines of, we want to have, first of all, we want to make the enemies all spawn, I think, from one instance that we put on the map. My thinking here is that we don't need to specifically place every single one because one, it wastes storage. If they're all going to fly out in the same pattern from the same spot and they're just timed. We've done that before with another enemy type where we just had one, and then I think that was the low altitude projectile. It spit out a bunch of things when it came on screen, and then that caused a bunch of enemies to fly down the screen. We can do the same thing here where, we have a group of these enemies fly out and go across the screen, or for now, I think what we'll do is we'll just have them fly out straight down. We can work on the movement pattern in the next episode, but we want to make it so that they are, if you destroy all three, will have something happen. I don't know if we want to, right now we only have these tiles. This is another thing, we got to really get moving on artwork, and I will have to see what we're going to do there. But anyway, so maybe what I'll do is I'll make it that if you destroy all of them in a group, another one will spawn in the middle or something like that, just to prove the concept there. Now, what I want to do is I want to make it so that when we have, let's see, does that object actually have properties? Is that what it's showing me? Because what I want to do is I want to maybe assign a group number. I actually don't know if I even need to do it as a group number per se. It may be even sufficient to just have them once they're placed, they get assigned a group number, and the groups just get freed up as you as one group gets destroyed. I don't know that I like that option, but then at the same point, then I got to I have to manually track the groups, which is less good. I feel like I just want to have the group get assigned, and then as long as it tracks the group properly in the enemy itself. Maybe when they're spawned. Yeah, I think that's what I'm going to do. So basically what we're going to do is the enemy on... Yeah, we'll add a new enemy type, essentially. That will just be maybe in, you know, a little... I don't even know if it's going to be anything visible. Maybe it's just an invisible tile that we'll place. We'll have to look. And it will spawn those little ships, you know, one at a time, down the screen from the top. And then that coming into existence will get assign a group number to each of these guys. And then as you draw them, it will have a counter that will, you know, start with 3. And as you destroy it, it will decrement the counter to 2 and then to 1. And then if you get to 0, then it will spawn some other entity. The only thing is you obviously are going to have limited space and memory for doing something like that. Just trying to think what's the... Well, let's just do this as sort of a proof of concept if that's a good approach, and then we'll worry about how we're going to handle multiple groups just to start out with, because worst comes to worst, if we don't... If I can't think of a good way to do this dynamically, we can do something like say, okay, this is going to be group 0 for this object, and then for the next object we can have that there and say, okay, and then this one is group 1. I think there's such a thing as you can actually give types to these objects, and so, you know, they would have different groups assigned. Again, I don't like that approach because then I have to manually manage that. And if we get into a situation where we're moving things around and the groups get mixed up, there is the potential that I overlap the groups. But maybe that's acceptable as a you know, efficiency thing of not having to calculate the group that it's going to be part of every time. So anyway, we'll remove this custom property, save and re-export everything so that it's just you know, we can even no, we still need to do a new type here. So what we'll do is can we actually do this? I don't even know if we can do that or not. We could reuse. That might actually even be the best option, because we could reuse this so that there's no visual representation. There's a visual representation, but we're not wasting extra storage on the cartridge. Let's do that for now. Cannot find matching meta tile. Where's the project file? Guess we don't have that open anymore. Let's go do that. One of the things that I think would have been better overall is if I had worked more on getting the gameplay down first and then working on the tools to support that versus the other way around. I mean, either way, definitely learned a lot, and it's been a cool experience, just kind of putting everything together. But it's there's definitely on my side this sort of, I don't know what the right word is. I'm just feeling like we've spent a lot of time kind of messing around with some of this stuff, and would have liked to have made more progress in terms of gameplay. But at the same point, you make as much progress as you can. What did I do? Yeah, I saved that as map 1. Okay, so let's take a look at what's going on with the map. So the enemies here, the GID is this guy. Is it because we're not using that any? Yeah, so okay. Because we're not using, I forgot about that. So because we're not using the sprite in the game anymore, we're in the map anymore, it thinks it should be a meta tile. Oh, it helps if this is correct. Why is this not? Those are the palettes. Shouldn't care about. Could not find the matching meta tile, but you don't need that as a meta tile because you're not using it as a tile. You're just using. So actually, maybe that's. We can get rid of this from the map overall. Okay, there we go. That's what it was. So symbol total entities undefined. Oh. Forgot we changed. Let me save this off as I forgot that we had changed some of the variables and we didn't update the export tool. I don't want to do that right now. Let's just take a look and compare, just so that we can make sure nothing really got broken, and then we will make a note to fix that. I don't think anything else. I don't think there's too much that changed. Everything else looks okay. This is all the stuff that we had changed for the flickering. So you just got to remember, put this in the notes. So just wanted to make note of that. Hopefully this is still working. That was weird. Why is it... Is it because I used the tile as a sprite? I mean, that's certainly possible. I've never tried doing that before, mixing and matching, so it may be that it doesn't like that and confuse the export process. Let's see. We gotta get rid of that one. Okay, let's see if that fixed that. Huh. That's strange. Why would that have broken? Green tile, water tile, bullet player, a little bit, FX, map1 JSON. There are no enemies. Oh, I didn't. Yeah, it helps if you copy the exported stuff over and not just rebuild. That's something that we have to address at some point. The fact that you still have to manually copy the junk over to make it work. Because it is less than optimal that is how you have to do it. What? There's part of me that vaguely recalls that this was somehow a problem, that you had to have one object do any of you remember that? Alright, so then we get rid of this from the list because it's already in the map. I re-exported that, right? Sim a little bit is undefined, but it's okay. Maybe I didn't export this. I thought I exported this map, but maybe I didn't. Okay, and then draw entities. Let's get rid of that one and get this one in place. Yeah. All right, so let's see if that fixes this. Okay, so there is this requirement that you have to have the one. Let's see if we can work with it this way. I don't really feel like spending too much time. Actually, it doesn't even... probably doesn't even need to be visible technically on the map. We could put it in a position where it's already too late for it to be spawned. But, okay. I don't care about that right now, I don't think. So, make a note of that too. Okay, so let's see how we can make this happen. So in the part of the code where we're looking to see if an enemy needs to be spawned, let's do this. Let's well, let's first get it spawning properly, and then we'll worry about the grouping. So here's the add map object. That's to spawn the enemy at the top of the screen. So what it's going to do is, as we've talked about, it's going to spawn this guy here at the top of the screen. The X position will be based on what's in the map, but the Y position will be at the top of the screen. And we need to... How could we handle this in a way that still used the same object, but allowed us to spawn multiple? I mean, the easiest way is we create yet another thing called, you know, like a spawn point or something like that for it. But the problem is that right now it's all tied to the instance. So maybe... I don't think we use that data variable here for anything. So what we can do... So what we should do is we should introduce a way of add a spawn point to the map not directly tied to a single sprite type. Which, you know, when you say it, sounds intuitive, but I was so focused on getting it so that you could actually see the things on the map. Maybe it wasn't a great idea, I'm not sure. Alright, so let's see, process a little bit. It gets the Y position and it adds 1, compares it to the bottom of the screen, and if it's not equal, it will, let's see, it will store the Y position in there, and then it will set the entity pointers up to check if it collides with the player. Okay, good. So we're not using data and we're not using timer, which we're going to want. So we're probably going to want to introduce another type called group, or sorry, another byte called group that groups the items together. But let's start with data and timer. Or actually, you know what, we could even combine it in data, because if we're going to limit, if the groups only need to be up to, if we have 1, 2, 4, 8, if we have 4 bits, then that gives us up to 15 groups. Right, because that gives us 1 hexadecimal byte in the nibble there. Or not 1 hexadecimal byte, 1 hexadecimal digit. And then the other one can be, the other nibble can be used to represent if this thing is the one that was spawned originally and should spawn others, or if it was the if it was a spawned instance. So let's do this. Add map object. Let's we're going to add some logic here. And what it's going to do is it's going to, in addition to setting up the X position, Y position, and the type, we're going to, oh, and let's go into this, store X with T1. Let's load A and with 1. And we're going to store it into objects entity data X. And basically what that's going to mean is the little bit objects will be checking data to see if the first 4 bits are non-zero. And if they're non-zero, it will spawn additional, it will use a counter and spawn additional instances of itself. If it's 0, then it'll just skip that part. So let's do that. So load A objects plus ND Y data X. We want to AND it, not NAT it, AND it with 0.4, sorry, 0F. And then if it's equal, we'll just go over here. But if it's not equal, then we will load A with the timer value. We should probably set the timer value. We'll encompass the initialization here. So there's going to be 1 frame of initialization before the thing actually starts counting, and that's okay. So let's load. We have A already in there. It's non-zero, so now let's compare it to 1. Branch if not equal to already initialized. We'll call it, we'll say LB already initialized. It's that guy. Let's give it a real label, skip. Spawn processing. Okay, so if it's already in, if it's 1, then it's sorry, if it's not equal to 1, then it's already been initialized. Otherwise, we're going to load this with 2, and we won't care what the value is in data because we're clearing it out, or we're setting it to 2. And like I was saying, the group will be part of the upper part of the byte, and then we'll load a counter with the timer, I mean, with a, well, there are a couple of things we need, right? We need to, actually, you know what? This is not a good way to do it. Let's do this. If it's not oh, no, we do need to do that because, sorry, I forgot. We need to set it because it needs to, we're going to add the additional objects here without, oh, you know what? We could still do that, can't we? Because T1 will get the X integer. Okay, yeah, we don't need to do this. Sorry, just was not thinking that through that clearly. So let's say, okay, we're going to load the A with data. We're going to check it if it's if the bottom part is 0. If it's not equal, then we're going to skip. Okay, if it's equal, Sorry. If it's equal. Yeah, so it will, when we spawn the new ones from this one, we will set the data lower nibble here to be non-zero. Okay, so then if it's zero, then it's been initialized already. Or no, it hasn't been, it potentially hasn't been initialized. I think we're gonna do a little bit. We're gonna be a little bit more specific here. So one will be that it is not spawning. Oh, but we can't do that. It's going to be 0 when we come in. It'll be 1 if it was spawned by this. But it... So we need to do two checks. If it's either 0 or 2, then we want it to process. So actually what we say is branch if not equal, branch if equal to 1. Because if it's any other value, we're good. So now, branch if not and, just compare. Otherwise, if it's 0 or 2, so this is so much easier when you have higher level code to kind of work through this. So load this if it's 0 or 2, then we're going to continue. If it's 1, we're going to jump to skip the processing. Okay, so then we want to load this again, and if it's equal, meaning it's 0, then it's already been it hasn't been initialized. So if it's not 0, which means it's going to have not equal set, because 0, the 0 flag won't be 1, then it's already been initialized. So we're going to load 2, and we're going to store that into data. So that means it's been initialized, and then we're going to load the counter and or the timer, and we're going to use the timer. We're going to split the timer. We're going to have the bottom timer and the top timer. So the top timer is going to be how many ships have spawned, and this will be how many frames have passed. So we're limited by that to just 15 frames. That might not be okay, and then we'll have to come up with a different approach for this and use a secondary timer or something like that, but this should be sufficient for what we're doing right now. And the nice thing about it is, as we subtract from this on the timer, the number of ships that need to be spawned will naturally decrease, and we can stop when the counter hits, the timer hits 0. All right, so now it's been initialized, and if it's been initialized already, then we just say load the timer. Well, actually, we can just first decrement it, and then we need to load it, and then we need to AND it with this. Well, actually, so branch if equal, so if the whole thing is 0, then skip spawn processing, right? Because if the whole thing is equal, yeah, you know what, let's, we should be loading it first. Load it, and if it's 0, we're done spawning things. If it's not, then we just decrement that and set the carry and subtract 1. And then AND it. And then if it's equal, because we got 0, well, if it's not equal, except, okay. So, yeah, this is all like this whole complicated dance of how the initialization is going to be handled. So, let's talk about this for a second here. So when the object is initially created, right, we're going to have data is going to be 0. So when we come into processing it, we'll say, okay, data, if it's 1, then it was spawned by another object, right? If it's 0, it was the OG ship, but not initialized. And if it's 2, it's also the OG ship, but initialized. And then for the timer, we're starting in at 3F and we're subtracting 1. So as we subtract down, we're going to get to 3,0. And so then we do the AND, which gets rid of this part and just shows us what this is. And says, okay, if we get 0, then we want another ship, which will spawn with, like we said, with data being 1, until we get to the part where we have 0, 0, and then we're done spawning ships. So, so branch if not equal, that's this. So if it's equal, then we're going to spawn the ship. So let's do that. I don't remember the syntax for entity type X position on Y position. So the entity type is, I think it's just called little bit, right? Load A with that value and store it into T1, which is the entity type. Load A with the X position of this ship, and store that into T2. This will need to change. This will need to change as we make the ship move in both the Y and the X direction, because then we needed to start in the originating X coordinate of the ship. But for now, this will be fine. So that is the type, the X and the Y. And then we're going to call add map object. And then cool. And then T1 will have the new X position, this new index of the new object. So what we're going to do is transfer X to A, because we need to keep that value for a moment, and then load X with T1. And then we're going to load a objects entity data X. No, sorry, we're going to store into that. So we're going to, well, I guess we can't just do that then. So we're going to transfer to A and push A onto the stack. We're going to load X with T1. Then we're going to load A with the value 1 and store it. You know, we might be able to do that with Y. I don't know if that's going to break something. Let's see. Process. Is Y in use at all? Here it's not. So we could probably use that instead. so we don't have to push onto the stack. So transfer X to A. Say load Y. Load Y with T1, load A with 0, load X, I mean, with 0, 1. Or actually, I don't know why I was doing that. To be consistent, we can say load X with T1, load Y with the value of 1, store Y into the data, and then transfer A back to X, and now our our X register is back to the original value. So maybe this works. Let's see. No such scope entities. Entity type. 29. Store Y, so you can't. Okay. All right, I didn't think about that, but that's fine. So transfer X to A, push A, load X, load A, store A. So I guess you can't use Y to store into memory with using X as an index, which is fine. You can just pull A off the stack and transfer it back to X. So we have our original X index in place there. Range error. So we gotta So we've added enough code in there that these local the jumps to these process calls are too far. So we need to add these intermediate jumps. Let's see what happens here now. I'd be curious to see how the enemy behavior goes here. I don't remember where in the map this guy is. He's after that first block there. There's a second one, so it should be. All right, so that's not terrible. That's not terrible because that did spawn. Let's see. Because we did 3F. We got 1, 2, 3. Yeah, so what we really should have done if we only wanted 3 was 2F. That was just, I wasn't really thinking about it too, because it's the 0 indexing thing. Because the first one, the last one is with the number being, oh, really? Why did I not rebuild this and relaunch it? Or, huh. There's the first one. It's odd. that added 3. Let's think about that for a second. So the first time, so there's the first ship. Oh yeah, so there's the first ship which has no, which just gets spawned, right, by the map code calling add map object. And then the second one is spawned by the first ship by counting down the F down to the 0 one time, and then this gets decremented to 0, and then we get down to 0 one more time, and the last ship gets added before we're done processing it. So that actually all makes sense. That adds 3 to the game. So that's fine. I just wasn't thinking about that clearly. So that is essentially that. Now the problem is we could see that they're grouped really close. I wanted them spread out a little bit more, but I guess that's about 15 frames, right? So what we really want is probably a little bit of an additional delay there. So in our entities, right now we have timer and data, which is what we're using for this. Maybe we split it up, and just the first 2 bits are used for the initialization in data, so that leaves us 6 more bits. That would leave us with the possibility of, you know what, for now, we can add another byte. Because it's 1 more byte per object, and if we really need to, we can figure out some sort of more complex encoding, but I really don't want to do that. Alright, so now that would change the timer so that, let's say we want to make it 60, so we want to do 1 every second. So that's 3C, which I should know by now, but I just don't. And then we're going to load 2 into timer 2. Now this may very well break a few things because we are messing with some stuff here. So we're going to load the timer. And let's see, if timer 2 is 0, yeah, let's do this. Let's make that 3, and if timer 2 is 0, then we're done. Otherwise, decrement timer load a that. And then branch if not equal to skip processing. Otherwise, load a 3C, store it into timer. Right, so now we're resetting the timer. We're going to decrement timer 2. And then we're going to spawn that element. And then the rest is the same. All right, so, oh geez, 377. What is this? Why? Compare X U-bit shooter ASM 377 range error 280 not in Oh, because the... Okay, it's too big. So we gotta decrease our upper bound. So max entities right now is 1C, which is what? 1C is 28. So we're gonna have to make it 1B. So we're gonna be down to 27 entities. No, that's still too big. So we're down to 16. Oh, I was like, wait a minute, why did that drop so suddenly? Because I'm not thinking about this clearly. All right, there we go. And then what's the problem with that in line 12? Objects, yes, okay. So we're right now we've decreased our max entities to 25, which again for objects and what are they called? Projectiles. That's not too bad. Okay. That's 25 objects and 25 projectiles all simultaneously in memory. We could play around with that, and we could make a structure that's specific for projectiles and one that's specific for entities so that we can fit more projectiles, which we may have to end up doing because this is a shmup, and you do tend to have a lot of projectiles on screen at once, but we'll see. For now, I just wanted to keep it uniform. So let's see if this spawns properly now. No, not at all. Load A timer 2. Decrement timer, load A. Load A. Branch if not equal. Why? So when this comes in, it says, okay, if it's 1, then skip spawn processing. Otherwise, if it's 0, go to, it's already initialized, which we did. And then timer 2. Where is the decrementing timer 2? There. Okay, so the first time through it's 3, which means it's not 0. So then we're going to decrement the timer and then load it. And then if it's 0, or if it's not 0, we're going to skip processing the spawning. Otherwise, it's 0, so we're going to load it with 3C. And then we're going to decrement the second timer. And we're going to add a map object. And then once we have the map object, we will set its data to 1, thereby making it a what's it called? Thereby making it use a not skip the initialization process. So what's going on with this? Let's make the timer really large and see if that changes the spawning spacing here. I would expect that it should, but if it doesn't, then we'll know something else is going on. Yeah, so it's not doing it at all. Did I reverse my logic? I tend to do that. Load A, timer 2, branch if equal, to skip spawn processing, decrement timer, load A with timer. Branch if not equal to skip spawn processing. Otherwise, load that, store it there, decrement. I mean, that looks right, but I'm sure it's something silly that I'm not doing right. So let's go into this guy here and let's check the logic. Let me reverse the game. Oh, because the game is... I had actually paused it in the game instead of just in the emulator. So we got to rewind however many seconds of pausing that was. It might be faster to just emulate through it at full speed instead of waiting for the rewind to happen. Let's do this then, since we're coming into this for the first time and they haven't spawned yet. Let's set a breakpoint. Okay, so this is the first one. A is 0, which is what we expect, so we're gonna initialize this guy to 2, store that in the timer, and store 3 in the timer. Why is that one F? Load A, FF, store A. Load A3, store A. What? Step back. Shift F10. Care to explain that? Go back, please, for a moment here. I missed something. Load A2, store it. Load A. Why did load AFF become 1F? What am I missing? Is it... Is it something stupid? Like, it's FF is 0, so it's not that. Load A with FF. What? What's going on? Why is it not 3 here? Oh, is it because I'm... No. This is really weird. X is 9. Compare 1. Branch of equal, load A, branch of not equal, load A2, store A, okay, storing A into that. So then it should be load. What? To store. I don't understand that. How is loading A with FF getting 1F? What is 1F? 31. Am I missing something? Like what? Load A with FF. Yeah. That is really bizarre. Is there... A91F. See, it says, so the load A02 is this, A902. The assembler generated A91F instead of A9FF, or at least that's what Messin loaded. Let's make this again. Oh, I never rebuilt this. That's what happened. That's pretty strange. I'm not sure why it did that, but okay. So that was just a mistake in my code. Let's slow this down. So now it's broken because of possibly some sort of bad logic in here. Great. So let's do this. Let's just clear this out for a second. I wonder if it's something I did in the jumps here. Let's roll back a second here, because L process player, compare branch of equal L process player, L process explode, goes to process explode, L process little bit is, yep, that should all be okay. This will obviously not work because the timer 2 doesn't exist. That's okay, let's ignore that for now. I'm okay with this having bad logic for just that one thing. So we can get to the bottom of what just happened. Okay, so that's now normal. So let's go back. Let's add timer 2 back. Oops, timer 2. And we're going to get this problem because we have too many entities now. So let's scale that back to 1.9. Okay. And that broke that. It's still too many, and there's some sort of additional bug that I'm not aware of. Oh, you know, there could be an overlap between the projectiles and the sprites now as a result of the increase in size and it overlapping the memory. Because those bytes, you know, it's just one byte, but it adds up. So let's see if I make it really small. Now I'm not getting anything. Interesting. Why max entities, U-bound entities, the size of entity. I mean, let's just make this really ridiculously puny. Say 8. I don't know why that would. Let's look at this for a second. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 10 bytes for the entity times 8. So that's 80 bytes a piece. It shouldn't overflow. That's 80 and 80, so that's 160 bytes in RAM. So that should be okay. I'm not sure why that would have broken things so badly. Unless there's something where it's specifically Is there something where it's specifically counting by 9? I mean, these are all using the size of entity, which should have changed to 10. So that didn't do it. Well, we're close. I'm going to wrap up because, like I said, I wanted to keep this one relatively short and to about an hour. We can look back at this on Monday when I start back up here. I'm just curious to see, now that I've changed the size back, I've got to make this essentially do nothing. How do you do that in Visual Studio? Sorry, code. What do? You do. I forget. There's a way to. Oops. That's not what I wanted to do. Although that's cool. There's a way to add. There it is. Control Alt and the arrow key gives you the multi-line select, and what we'll do is comment that all out except this, so that it doesn't have a problem with the missing variable, missing struct thing. So that didn't break. We can go back to this. That's too big. I forget what it was. I think it was 1C. that's too big. Okay. Or that's not too big. That works fine. So, all right, let's, we'll look back at that. I mean, the spawning was working. I wanted to add that additional timer, but there's obviously something that's relying on the size being fixed somehow. And I'm not sure where that would be or why, because I was under the impression that I was using size of entity everywhere. But clearly I'm not. Or there's some other issue with the entity size increasing that's causing a problem, and we'll have to step through that and see once we add it back what the actual issue is. But until then, thank you for watching. As always, if you like what you're seeing, subscribe and follow this journey as we continue to work on this game. If you have any questions, you can reach me on Twitter at Clairvis. You can also find me on Nintendo Age on the Discord as Zelius. And check out the links below in the description for more details on the Patreon, the project, and just any additional details about the video. So, thanks for watching. Have a great night, and I'll see you next week. Take care.